He was the perfect son, the top student, the boy with a flawless future mapped out before him. Until one diagnosis erased it all. Given only 3 months to live, Julian Zhuang decides to throw the script away. In a world that's lost all color, he meets Lily, a girl who appears as if from a dream, pulling him from the depths of his despair into a whirlwind of skipped classes, street food, and simple, forgotten joy. But who is this mysterious girl? And in a life that's now a countdown, can she teach him how to truly live before his time runs out? Julian Zhuang stared at his doctor, his face a mask of sincerity. He pleaded his case, promising to give up all the small joys of a teenage life: spicy hot pot, barbecue, milk tea, soda. He would go to bed early. He swore, no more late nights. He could feel it in his bones, a deep, creeping sense that something was terribly wrong. Dr. Chun, a man in his 50s with a receding hairline and thick, gold-rimmed glasses, sat before a wall covered in commendation banners, silent testaments to his skill and reputation. He listened patiently before delivering a single, devastatingly gentle sentence. No, you should eat whatever you want. To Julian, the words were a thunderclap in a clear sky, deafening him. The diagnosis sheet Dr. Chun handed over was a blur of medical jargon, but the meaning was simple and brutal: terminal, incurable. Julian's voice trembled, a primal fear of death gripping him. He had to ask, how much time did he have left? Dr. Chun sighed, a flicker of sorrow in his eyes. A maximum of 3 months. He advised Julian to try and accept it, that it was a fate no one could escape. As a doctor, he had seen death countless times, and he thought he'd grown numb to it. But to see a young man, barely at the start of his life, receive such a sentence, it was still a tragedy. In the face of disease, life was so fragile. Clutching the report, Julian stumbled out of the hospital, not quite remembering how he left. His mind was a blank slate as he drifted down the street, bumping into a row of parked rental bikes. He was 18. The world was in full bloom, yet his life had just been given an expiration date. 3 months, 90 days, 2,160 hours. And Dr. Chun had said at most. It could be less. In the blink of an eye, he would have to say goodbye to this world, and he was not ready. Tears traced silent paths down his cheeks. A knot of grief and regret tightened in his chest, with no release in sight. Outside the hospital, a wholesale market was buzzing with activity. A clothing store blasted announcements of a clearance sale, its racks crammed with cheap, colorful clothes. The sterile, antiseptic smell of the hospital still clung to him, and a desperate urge to shed his clothes, to throw them away, washed over him. As if by doing so, he could create a boundary between himself and that place. As if he could slow the footsteps of death. It was a foolish, self-deceiving thought. He pointed to a shirt so garish it looked like a painter's palette had been spilled on it. He asked the shop owner for the price. The owner hesitated, telling the boy that the style didn't really suit him. But Julian didn't care. He paid the $20, needing the vibrant, clashing colors in his life, a desperate antidote to the clinical white he'd just escaped. The gaudy shirt was a stark contrast to his polite, scholarly demeanor, making him look like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. Afterward, he stopped by a bookstore and bought a 5-volume box set of a classic martial arts epic, the weight of the books a heavy, solid presence in his hands. He passed a tea shop and ordered their new spring special, a taro boba tea. Back at school, the security guard stopped him at the gate. While the school didn't enforce a strict uniform policy, his flamboyant shirt was too much. Julian had to show his student ID and a signed leave of absence slip from his homeroom teacher. Even then, the guard made a phone call to confirm before letting him pass. As Julian walked through the gates, he heard the guard sigh behind him, muttering about the disrespectful attitude of students these days. A wave of sorrow washed over Julian. The guard didn't know that this disrespectful student was the top-ranked student in his year for 2 years running, an honor student and an outstanding student leader. But now, all of it was just an empty title. In 3 months, everything about him would vanish like smoke. The bell for the end of class had just rung, and the schoolyard was buzzing with noise. When Julian, dressed like an exotic rooster, walked into his classroom, all heads turned. Whispers erupted. Some wondered what had gotten into him. Others remarked that if the dean of discipline caught him, he'd be writing a 3,000-word apology. Someone joked that he took a sick day yesterday and came back even sicker. Julian ignored the stares and walked to his desk. Taking a deep breath, he passed the taro boba tea to the girl sitting in front of him. Her name was Mia Lin, the undisputed beauty of the school, with elegant, almond-shaped eyes and skin as fair as milk. She carried herself like a princess, surrounded by admirers she paid no mind to. But with Julian, she was different, always showing a softer side. They had been deskmates for a long time, their friendship pure and precious. He apologized for bailing on their movie plans yesterday. She questioned him, asking why he hadn't replied to her messages. Julian pulled out his phone and saw a flood of unread texts. 3 were from her, moving from concern about his hospital visit to a playful threat of ignoring him if he didn't reply. It was her typical way of showing she cared, hidden under a layer of pride. Julian's nose tingled, and he fought back tears. He just asked her to drink the tea, as a sign that she forgave him. After a moment's hesitation, Mia took a sip. She declared that she was only drinking it because she was thirsty, not because she had forgiven him. Julian managed a weak, bitter smile. Just then, a tall, lanky boy plopped down in the seat beside him, his voice booming. It was Leo Lee, his deskmate and best friend. They had a running joke of calling each other son and dad. Leo stared at Julian's shirt, thinking his eyes were playing tricks on him. Julian was the class president, the model student, always rule-abiding. Today, he looked like a rebel. Julian explained he'd just come from the hospital and wanted a change of mood. Leo laughed, joking that all he needed was a thick gold chain to complete the look. Then, Julian placed the heavy set of martial arts novels on Leo's desk. Leo, a huge fan of the genre, was overjoyed. He threw an arm around Julian's shoulder, exclaiming his son was so thoughtful and asking if he'd won the lottery. Julian made up a lame excuse about it being an early birthday present, 8 months early. Mia chuckled at the exchange. Looking at his two best friends, a silent scream echoed in Julian's mind. I don't want to leave you. Now that he had the diagnosis, Julian didn't know who to tell. Most people would turn to their parents, but his situation was complicated. His father, Victor Zhuang, and his mother, Helen Su, had divorced when he was 5. It struck him as strange that for most professions, you needed training and a license. To drive a car, you needed a driver's license. To teach, a teaching certificate. But to become a parent, all it took was a moment of impulse, a single accident, to bring a new life into the world. No one ever asked the child if they wanted to be there. Julian's childhood had been unhappy. As far back as he could remember, his parents were in a constant state of war. The house was a battlefield of overturned furniture and shattered porcelain. Then one day they were done. During the divorce settlement, his father hadn't wanted custody, viewing a child as an obstacle to starting a new family. It was only at the insistence of his grandparents, who argued for the continuation of the family line, that Julian stayed with his father. A year later, his father brought home a woman who wore too much makeup. 2 years after that, they had a son of their own. In fairy tales, children with stepmothers always suffer. While reality wasn't that dramatic, Julian's life became a quiet performance of tiptoeing around, of reading moods, and holding his tongue. It was his home, yet he often felt like an unwelcome guest. His mother, Helen, never remarried. She worked as a train attendant, always on the move, coming home only once every week or two. She rented a small apartment near his school, and sometimes, when Julian couldn't stand being at home, he would stay there. Over time, he became an even more peripheral figure in his own family. His parents were at work. Not wanting to disturb them, Julian went to a quiet corner on the balcony and, after a long hesitation, dialed a landline number. The phone rang for a long time before someone picked up. An old, familiar voice answered. Julian's eyes immediately filled with tears. He told his grandpa it was him, that he missed him. The joy in his grandfather's voice was immediate. He called for his wife to come to the phone to talk to their grandson. The only real affection Julian ever felt was during school holidays, when he visited his grandparents in the countryside. They were his only source of comfort. He told them he would visit on the weekend. His voice strained as he tried to sound normal. His grandfather chuckled, telling him not to worry about them and to focus on his studies. He could visit during the summer break. Julian quickly made an excuse about class starting and hung up, afraid he would break down if he stayed on the line any longer. He couldn't bear the thought of telling these two kind, old souls the devastating news. How would they handle the grief? The school bell rang. Julian wiped his tears and walked back to his seat, forcing a calm expression. He tried to lose himself in the world of academics, but it was no use. The schedule on the blackboard indicated 2 back-to-back math periods with Ms. Wu, a teacher the students had nicknamed the Dragon Lady. Math class was usually a potent sedative, and 5 minutes in, half the class was already drifting off. Leo, taking advantage of Ms. Wu turning to write on the board, sneakily pulled out one of the martial arts novels. He was immediately captivated by a classic battle scene. Julian leaned over, whispering a warning to his friend about reading a novel in the Dragon Lady's class. But Leo was lost in the world of heroes and villains, a world far more interesting than mathematical formulas. Julian, the model student, sat upright, trying to focus. But unlike before, the teacher's words were just sounds. He couldn't process any of it. He felt as if the warmth of life was slowly being siphoned from his body. Leo was deep in a passage about a climactic duel when he felt a sudden, murderous aura. He looked up to see Ms. Wu's sharp gaze fixed on him. She called him up to the blackboard to solve a problem. The teacher on the podium sees everything. Ms. Wu was known for her strictness. She tolerated no nonsense in her classroom. Leo dragged his feet to the board. He stood there, chalk in hand, staring at the incomprehensible equation as if he'd been turned to stone. Who could solve this, besides some emotionless learning machine? Ms. Wu's face was grim. She scolded him for reading novels when his math scores were so poor, pointing out that he sat next to Julian and should be learning from his example. Leo muttered under his breath that Julian was the one who bought him the book. Ms. Wu confiscated the novel and sent him to stand at the back of the room. Then, her tone softened. She called on Julian to come and solve the problem, to set a positive example for the class. As a top student who always aced his math exams, a problem like this should have been trivial for him. But when he heard his name, Julian seemed to jolt back to reality, as if his soul had been wandering and was suddenly yanked back into his body. He walked to the blackboard, but, like Leo, he just stood there, unable to write. His mind was filled with the image of his diagnosis, his death sentence. The numbers and symbols that were once his friends now seemed like a foreign language. Ms. Wu was surprised. She knew this problem was well within his abilities. She had intended to use him to make a point to Leo, but her plan had backfired. Julian's shoulders began to tremble. The piece of chalk fell from his hand, and the tears he'd been holding back began to stream down his face. He was engulfed by an immense sadness, looking like a small, lost child. Ms. Wu's heart ached for him. She had an urge to hug him. The other students were bewildered, whispering among themselves. They couldn't believe a problem could stump Julian Zhuang, let alone make him cry. Mia stared at his back, a sudden pang of worry in her chest. She had never seen him so distraught. He was hiding something. Ms. Wu gently told him to go back to his seat. Sobbing, Julian asked if he could go to the washroom. The teacher sighed and nodded. She always had a soft spot for her best students. Once in the hallway, Julian lost all control, breaking down into ragged, heart-wrenching sobs. Every teacher, every classmate. He cherished them all so deeply. In just 3 months, he would be gone, separated from them forever. The world outside was painfully beautiful. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, and the air smelled of fresh earth. The more beautiful it was, the more desolate Julian felt. Fearing someone would see him in this state, he hurried down the stairs and ran towards the sports field, tears streaming down his face as he ran. In the northwest corner of the field, a dense grove of tall ginkgo trees offered a secluded spot, their leaves of vibrant green in the sun. Here, in this quiet corner, Julian finally let his grief pour out. Fat tears soaked into the soil at his feet, and he cried until his throat was raw. He didn't understand. He had never done anything wrong. Why was fate so cruel? He had always thought of death as a distant, abstract concept. When it finally arrived, it shattered his will completely. As he cried, a faint, thread-like melody reached his ears. At first, he thought he was imagining it. But gradually, the music became clearer, its melody unique and winding, full of intricate turns. He was certain he had never heard it before. The ethereal tune washed over him like a cool stream, slowly soothing his profound sorrow. He blinked, his vision blurry with tears, and looked at the world, which now seemed both real and illusory. A clear voice sounded from above his head, asking him if he wasn't ashamed, a big guy like him crying his eyes out. Julian jumped, startled. He looked up and saw a girl sitting on a branch of a ginkgo tree. His face flushed crimson. She must have seen the whole pathetic display. She was beautiful, with a delicate oval face, almond-shaped eyes, and a single, lopsided braid resting on her left shoulder. She wore a simple white blouse and a royal blue pleated skirt that fell to her calves. On one foot was a spotless white canvas shoe, the other was bare. Most striking of all was the fresh peach blossom tucked behind her ear. Julian had always thought Mia was the prettiest girl he knew, but the girl in the tree seemed to possess a charm that was on another level. He asked her why she wasn't in class. She put a finger to her lips, shushing him. Her fingers were long and slender, like carved white jade, and her lips were small and red, like freshly picked strawberries. He introduced himself in a low voice, telling her his name was Julian Zhuang, from class 9. The girl replied that her name was Lily Su, from class 23. Her voice was lovely, like pearls dropping on a jade plate, or rain on banana leaves. Julian knew there were only 22 classes in their year. Her saying she was from class 23 was probably a way of keeping her distance, not wanting to reveal her real class. Lily dangled her bare foot. She asked Julian to pick up her shoe for her. He looked down and saw a white canvas shoe at the base of the tree. She must have kicked it off while climbing. He picked it up and stretched on his toes to hand it to her, asking why a girl would climb so high. His gaze inadvertently fell on her calf, slender and smooth as lotus root, a perfect work of art. For a fleeting moment, a wicked thought crossed his mind. The girl above him was wearing a skirt. If he just shifted his angle. But it was only a thought. He wasn't that kind of person. Lily, perched on the branch, tried several times to put her shoe on but couldn't manage it. Julian watched her, nervous that she might lose her balance. Then she swung her foot down and tossed the shoe back to him, asking him to put it on for her. It was a bold request for two people who had just met, but given her predicament, it was understandable. After a moment's hesitation, Julian swallowed hard and reached out, his hand closing around her delicate, warm ankle. It was the first time he had ever touched a girl's foot, and his heart hammered in his chest, his breathing heavy. With some effort, he managed to get the shoe on and tied the laces into a slightly clumsy bow. She laughed, teasing him for being clumsy. He muttered back that she was the clumsy one, climbing so high in a skirt. With her shoes on, she looked down at the ground. She said it was high, that she was a little scared, and asked him to catch her. Julian nodded and held out his arms. After psyching herself up, Lily took a leap of faith. Julian caught her securely in his arms, her soft body radiating a faint, sweet fragrance. It felt like a scene straight out of a romance drama. Lily looked up into his eyes, her cheeks blushing. She quickly asked him to put her down. He obliged, helping her stand steady. Their eyes met, and they both broke into a smile. Lily's smile was so clean and pure, like sunshine after a spring rain, and it began to chase away the shadows in Julian's heart. This girl who had dropped from the sky seemed to possess a magical power. She asked him what he was doing hiding here and crying. He tried to sound nonchalant, explaining that he was just dealing with some bad news and needed to let it out. She pouted, saying she had her own troubles, but she wasn't crying about them. Julian just shook his head with a bitter smile, not arguing. Lily seemed about his age, a cheerful, optimistic girl. How could she possibly understand his pain? She was like the morning sun, just beginning to shine, while he was the evening sun, about to crash into the horizon and be swallowed by the night. The bell signaling the end of the fourth period rang out across the campus. It was lunchtime. Life flooded back into the quiet school buildings. Lily's eyes twinkled. She told him that if he was unhappy, she would take him out for some good food, and he wasn't allowed to cry again without her permission. Listening to her slightly bossy words, Julian found himself nodding in agreement, as if by some strange compulsion. The warmth that had been drained from his body seemed to return with the bright sunlight. Even if he only had 3 months left, every single day was worth living to the fullest. If his life could not have length, perhaps it could have width. This girl was like a cheerful angel, sent specifically to guide him and save his soul. Julian and his new acquaintance, Lily, walked along the bustling street. At lunchtime, the area outside the school always came alive, the air thick with the aroma of various food stalls. After the intense emotional storm, Julian's calm had returned, and with it, his hunger. He asked Lily why she had been skipping class. She gave him a blank look and said she wasn't skipping. She was out picking ginkgo leaves. He called her out on it, pointing out that it was class time. She just laughed and explained that her class had gym. Julian was momentarily speechless. He had been so consumed by his grief that he hadn't noticed if there were any gym classes on the field. All he remembered was the silence under those ginkgo trees. Then she turned the question back on him. He explained, a little defensively, that he wasn't skipping either. He had permission from his teacher and just didn't want anyone to see him crying. He thought he'd found a perfect hiding spot, never imagining a girl would be watching from a tree above. Lily, sensing his unease, didn't press further. Instead, she announced that she would take him to eat something delicious, which was guaranteed to make him feel better. Her idea of something delicious was fried potato bites. The vendor diced the potatoes, fried them to a perfect golden brown, and then tossed them with a mix of salt, cumin, chili powder, chopped green onions, and sesame seeds. Crispy on the outside, soft on the inside. Lily, a self-proclaimed food connoisseur, insisted that they had to be extra spicy, urging the vendor to add more chili. She told Julian to wait while she went to buy sodas, asking if he preferred Coke or Pepsi. He chose Coke. He felt he needed the extra fizz. A few minutes later, the two new friends were sitting on a set of marble steps, devouring the spicy potatoes. The vendor had been generous with the chili. Julian's tongue was going numb, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. Lily wasn't faring much better. Her face flushed as she gulped down her iced Coke. Then, she blinked her large, sparkling eyes at him and said, "Tell me your sad story, so I can feel better." Julian gave her a look. He asked if she was trying to rub salt in his wound. She shook her head, biting her straw. She believed that talking about sad things helped make them less sad. Julian turned and looked at her profile. Her innocent expression made it easy to trust her. He hesitated for a moment, then began to speak. He told her about the summer he was 12, after graduating from elementary school. His dad had promised a family trip to the ocean. Julian had never seen the ocean and was so excited he couldn't sleep, packing his bags that night. Lily's eyes lit up with longing, saying his dad was so nice, and that she'd never seen the ocean either. Julian's expression darkened. But when he woke up the next day, the three of them were gone. His father's idea of family didn't include him. The atmosphere grew awkward. Lily wanted to comfort him, but didn't know what to say. Instead, she speared a piece of potato with her bamboo skewer and held it to his lips, asking if he wanted to try hers. He was confused, pointing out that it was all the same. She insisted it was different, because this one was from her. Her eyes were as clear as a lake after a spring rain. Julian ate the potato. It tasted just as fiery as his own, but this time, a faint sweetness bloomed in his heart. He continued his story. When he was 14, he was ranked first in the entire grade. At the parent-teacher conference, the teacher wanted his parents to speak on stage about their experience raising him. But his dad told his mom to go, and his mom told his dad to go. In the end, neither of them showed up. As he recounted the memory, his eyes reddened. It was the most humiliating afternoon of his life. His desk was covered in near-perfect test scores, But there was no one there to see them, no one to celebrate with him. He was a celebrated child with no one to celebrate him, an abandoned child of fortune. He had become so used to the absence of parental love that he'd grown desperate. Even now, with this fatal diagnosis, he didn't know whether he should tell his father or his mother. The pain was a thorn in his heart he'd never shared with anyone. But this girl, she made him feel safe enough to speak. Suddenly, Lily gasped that his nose was bleeding. She apologized, blaming the spicy potatoes. She quickly pulled out a tissue and helped him stop the bleeding, gently cupping the back of his head and carefully wiping away the warm blood. He could feel a gentle warmth seeping from her fingertips into his skin, and the tightness in his chest began to dissolve. After the bleeding stopped, he thanked her, explaining that he'd been getting nosebleeds frequently for the past 6 months. It wasn't the potatoes. Lily then took a wad of cash from her pocket, pulled out a few small bills for herself, and stuffed the rest into Julian's hand. She explained in her soft voice that she was keeping enough for the bus ride home, and he could use the rest to buy them food. Whenever she was sad, she would eat, and it always seemed to help. Julian smiled. There was a saying that love and good food were the only things that couldn't be betrayed. He told her he was the guy, so he should be the one paying. She stubbornly pouted, insisting it was her treat today. He could treat her next time she was sad. Julian readily agreed. After finishing their food and drinks, they embarked on a culinary tour. Lily skipped along, her skirt fluttering like the wings of a butterfly, but she would stop dead in her tracks at the sight of anything delicious. They ate their way down the street, from lamb skewers to savory crepes, from noodle soup to spicy hot pot. When Lily's money ran out, Julian bought her a strawberry milkshake. He was too full to get one for himself. She took a sip and exclaimed how delicious it was. He playfully shushed her, telling her not to act like she'd never had a milkshake before. She insisted it was amazing and offered him a taste. He hesitated, looking at the straw covered in her teeth marks. Even if it weren't, sharing a straw was intimate. They had only known each other for an hour. Then, like a magician, Lily produced a second, clean straw from her pocket, explaining she had grabbed an extra one when she bought the sodas. She poked it into the cup and offered it to him again. Julian looked into her clear eyes, and after a moment, he leaned in and took a sip. The rich strawberry flavor bloomed on his tongue. It was just a normal milkshake, but somehow, it tasted better than any he'd ever had. Sharing a drink with 2 straws was something couples did. Was she doing it on purpose, or was she just that innocent? Julian figured his looks weren't so great as to inspire love at first sight in such a beautiful girl. She must just be naturally naive. She then asked him seriously if they could be considered friends now. He replied, "Of course. You're the first friend I've made here." Lily's response was earnest, but Julian didn't quite understand what she meant by here. Under a clear sky dotted with lazy white clouds, Julian and his new friend Lily sat on a mall bench, their stomachs full from their lunchtime feast. The afternoon sun was warm. A light breeze rustled Lily's blue pleated skirt, revealing her slender calves as she swung her feet back and forth restlessly. She looked up at the sky and asked Julian if he was going back to school that afternoon. He answered without hesitation, no. A rebellious spark had been lit within him. He was going to skip the rest of the day. After more than a decade of being the perfect student, he was finally letting himself go a little. Being with a friend was far more interesting than being in a classroom. For the first time in his life, he felt the thrill of it. Lily scooted a little closer to him, the faint scent of her perfume drifting into his senses. In just a few hours, they had gone from strangers to we. She asked him where we should go. Julian thought for a moment, then asked if she liked to fish. She wrinkled her nose and shook her head, confessing she'd never caught a single fish in her life. Julian boasted that he was an expert and would take her to the river. In truth, he was far from an expert. He spent time fishing with his grandpa during summer breaks, a peaceful pastime, but the number of fish he'd actually caught in his life could be counted on one hand. Lily's lips curved into a pretty smile. She agreed, on the condition that he had to catch her a big, fat fish. They went to a tackle shop, where Julian spent a little over $100 on a cheap fishing rod. In the past, he would have agonized over the expense, but now, he knew there was no time left to save. As they passed a convenience store, Lily tugged on his sleeve, suggesting they buy some more snacks to eat by the river. Julian was exasperated, asking if she was a bottomless pit. She looked at him with pleading, pitiful eyes, begging for just a few little snacks. He surrendered immediately. Of course, whatever she wanted. She cheered like a child. Julian went inside and grabbed a random assortment of nuts, beef jerky, and cookies, unsure of what she liked. When he came out, he found Lily engrossed in her phone, laughing to herself at silly jokes online. He teased her about her profound reading material. She heard the sarcasm, but was unfazed. "Life is about being happy," she said. "Why does it have to be so profound?" Julian found himself agreeing. Knowing more doesn't necessarily make you happier. She added casually that in the end, everyone dies, scientists, thinkers, philosophers, everyone. Coming from a young person, the word death sounded so nonchalant. Julian froze for a second, then muttered, almost to himself, "Yeah, I'm going to die too." The school was built on a hillside, and at the bottom flowed a river that cut through the city. The water was a gentle, shimmering green, reflecting the afternoon sun in 1,000 tiny golden specks. Julian baited his hook, cast his line with a flourish, and then sat cross-legged on the smooth river stones, looking as serene as an ancient sage. But his moment of peace was broken by a peal of silvery laughter beside him. He told her to keep it down, or she'd scare away the fish. She apologized, explaining that a joke was just too funny, and held her phone out for him to see. He initially scoffed, claiming to be too deep for such childish humor, but she pleaded with him to just take a look. He relented, glancing at the screen, and that was it. Soon, their two heads were huddled together, and their silly laughter echoed along the riverbank. Lily had an incredibly low bar for humor, bursting into laughter at the most mediocre jokes. Julian, who usually prided himself on having a more refined sense of humor, found himself unable to resist her infectious joy. He tried to stifle his laughter, worried about the fish, which only made it harder. Lily then asked for the snacks. Julian pulled out the plastic bag and asked what she wanted. She told him to choose, as she liked everything. A true foodie is never a picky eater. He pulled out a bag of cookies and handed it to her. She tore it open and took an eager bite, exclaiming how crispy it was and offering him one. He said he was too full. She simply took a cookie and stuffed it into his mouth, calling him fussy. The cookie was crisp and sweet, but not as sweet as the girl's smile. Julian completely forgot about his role as a master fisherman, instead spending the afternoon reading jokes with Lily, a simple, pure happiness. When his neck finally started to ache, he looked up and realized how much time had passed. The sun's shadow had stretched long across the ground. The afternoon, which always seemed to drag on forever during class, had flown by in an instant. The setting sun cast a golden glow on their faces. Lily stood up and stretched, announcing that she had to catch the 6:10 bus home. Julian mumbled that he hadn't even caught a fish yet. She laughed and teased him, saying he looked like a big, silly fish himself. They walked back from the river, up the long stone steps to the food street. As they passed a dessert shop, Lily stopped again, staring wistfully at the beautiful cakes in the window. Julian was amazed. Surely, she couldn't be hungry again. She quickly clarified that she wasn't. She just thought, since he'd said his relationship with his family wasn't great, that maybe he could buy them a cake. Eating something sweet brings people joy, she said, her gaze sincere. If anyone else had made the suggestion, Julian would have refused instantly. A small cake couldn't mend over a decade of emotional distance. But looking into Lily's eyes, he couldn't bring himself to say no. Her intention was so genuine, so full of a naive belief that human warmth could conquer all indifference. On Lily's advice, Julian bought a strawberry cake. It was a bit pricey, and he felt a pang as he paid. They walked to the bus stop outside the school, just as the number 19 bus pulled up. Lily waved and hopped on. "Goodbye, Julian," she called. "Goodbye, my friend," he replied, but his voice was too soft for her to hear. What an interesting girl. Then, a dreadful realization hit him. He had forgotten to ask for her phone number. The bus pulled away, merging with the traffic until it disappeared from sight. Night fell, and the city lights began to glow, illuminating the dark sky. Julian carried the strawberry cake to the apartment complex where his mother, Helen, lived. He looked up at the countless lit windows, but felt no warmth. Not one of those lights was shining for him. He had just reached the stairwell when he ran into his mother, dragging a suitcase and rushing down the stairs. Helen was in her early 40s, but the constant hustle to make a living had left her looking haggard. "Julian, I'm busy," she said. "Make yourself some dinner, or just go home." The home she referred to was Victor Zhuang's place. Legally, his father had custody. "Mom, are you in a hurry? Can you stay and have some cake with me?" Julian asked, his eyes filled with hope. "No time. Next time," she said, glancing at her watch. "Not even for a few minutes," he pleaded. "No, you're 18 now. You're an adult. You need to be more sensible." With that, she turned and walked away. Watching her leave, Julian's eyes filled with a profound loneliness. What good would it do to tell her? It would only make her sad. After he was gone, she would still have to rush through life, from one place to the next. He knew there was a divorced colleague at her work who was pursuing her. Maybe without him, his mother would be free of her burdens and could find happiness again. Someone to take care of her in her old age. He was 18, an adult. Was he being sensible enough? After a difficult internal debate, Julian decided to go to his father's house. His young shoulders couldn't carry this burden alone. There was a saying that a father's love is like a mountain, something you can always lean on. Carrying the delicate strawberry cake, he crossed half the city again. The night wind was cold, sending a chill through him. When he got out of the elevator, he found the apartment door ajar, a warm yellow light spilling from the living room. The cheerful strains of "Happy Birthday" echoed from inside. Julian suddenly remembered. It was his younger brother Aaron's birthday. Their family used the lunar calendar for birthdays, a tradition from their hometown. At school, everyone just used the standard calendar. There was a large age gap between Julian and Aaron, and their relationship was distant, almost like that of a son from a first marriage and the son of a new family. In previous years, if Julian happened to be home for Aaron's birthday, he'd join the meal. If not, it didn't matter. He was an outsider in this home. He heard Aaron's voice. Dad, Mom, I hope our family of 3 will always be happy, and that you'll celebrate my birthday with me every year. Sure enough, in their eyes, this was a family of 3. He heard his stepmother, Susan, ask, Honey, should we call Julian and see if he's coming back? Victor's voice was indifferent. No need. He's probably at his mom's. He knows the way back if he wants to come. The family of 3 happily shared the birthday cake. Their laughter was like a series of daggers stabbing at Julian's heart. In that moment, he felt utterly redundant. His father was basking in the joy of his new family. Was he really going to be so thoughtless as to slap his own death sentence down on the table? If he were gone, it would perfectly complete their family of 3. He wouldn't have to pop up like a thorn in their side anymore. Just as he was about to turn and leave, the door swung open. His stepmother, Susan, found him standing there, lost and exposed. Julian, you're back. Why didn't you come in? He froze, feeling like a thief caught spying on someone else's happiness. He entered with his head down and mumbled a greeting to his father, who responded with a non-committal grunt. Every time he stepped through this door, he felt like he was walking on thin ice. On the dining table sat a large, elaborately decorated cake covered in colorful fruits and chocolates. In comparison, the small cake in his hands looked cheap and insignificant. Victor spoke, his voice heavy. It's Aaron's birthday. Wash your hands and have some cake. The air felt thick, suffocating. His arrival had shattered the cheerful atmosphere. He stammered. You guys go ahead. I'm just grabbing something from my room. He fled to his room and shut the door, finally able to breathe. To make good on his excuse, he dug out a bamboo flute from the back of a drawer, a prize he'd won in a music competition as a child. He hadn't played it in years. Soon, Aaron knocked. Dad and Mom told me to bring you some cake. Julian took a deep breath and opened the door. Thanks, Aaron. Happy birthday. Aaron squeezed into the room, his eyes landing on the strawberry cake with a look of disdain. Spoiled since birth and born to a different mother, he had no affection for his older brother. To him, Julian was just a bookworm with good grades. You didn't have to come back, Aaron said with open hostility. You don't like being here, and I don't like you being here. I'm leaving now, Julian said, grabbing his cake and the flute and rushing out of the bedroom. Susan saw him and feigned concern. Julian, where are you going so late? Julian stopped and looked deeply at his father. Dad, I have a heavy workload at school right now. It's more convenient to stay at Mom's. In 3 months. Will you come pick me up and bring me home? Victor looked startled, finding Julian's tone strange. 3 months from now, he would have graduated. It's okay if you don't come, Julian added, his voice full of disappointment, before rushing out the door. As the elevator doors closed, tears welled up in his eyes. He envied Aaron so much. He had parents, and yet he felt like an orphan. A terrible fate had befallen him, and he had no one to turn to. As he walked out of the complex, perhaps due to the intense emotional turmoil, the sickness inside him stirred. Warm drops of blood trickled from his nose, falling onto the gray pavement. The crimson blood was the same color as the tassel on his flute. In 3 months, he wouldn't be in this world anymore. It didn't really matter if anyone came to pick him up. What happened to his body, whether it was cremated and buried or scattered in the wind, it was all the same. Life was so bitter. Surely there wasn't a next one. Holding the flute, Julian wandered aimlessly through the night. He used several tissues, but the nosebleed wouldn't stop. He suddenly remembered that afternoon with Lily, when his nose had also bled. She had steadied the back of his head, her fingertips warm, and had easily stopped the bleeding. The memory of her smile brought a flicker of warmth to his cold, lonely heart. A dessert shop on the street was playing an old folk song from 40 years ago. The lyrics were about wandering far from home, which resonated with Julian. He felt like a homeless wanderer himself. Neither his father's nor his mother's place truly felt like home. They were just shelters. He didn't want to go back to his mother's empty apartment to face the lonely night alone. Thankfully, he still had a friend to rely on. Son, I've run away from home. Can I crash at your place for a night? Julian called Leo. Of course, I'll come down and get you, Leo replied without hesitation. A small smile touched Julian's lips. This son of his was truly dependable. If he were to leave this world, Leo would probably be devastated. When Leo saw Julian downstairs, his face covered in dried blood, he was immediately concerned. What happened to you? He asked. It's nothing, just been a bit stressed lately, Julian said dismissively. You better take care of yourself. I'm counting on you to be there for me when I'm old, Leo joked. That was their friendship. They couldn't resist a bit of playful teasing. It was a bond built on affectionate rivalry. Julian, however, was in no mood for jokes. He had been to Leo's home many times, always with a sense of envy. His parents were loving, the home was warm, and it was always filled with laughter. It was nothing like his own home, where he would retreat to his room to face 4 cold, silent walls. Mom, Julian is staying over tonight. He hasn't had dinner yet, Leo called out as soon as they walked in. You haven't eaten this late? I'll make you a bowl of noodles, his mother, Linda, called back from the kitchen. Thank you, Auntie. Julian said, his nose beginning to sting as he heard her gentle voice. If only he had a mother as kind as her. His own mother, Helen, was so consumed by work that she had little energy left for their relationship. Leo's father, Tom, came out and was alarmed by the sight of blood on Julian's face. He fussed over him, sending Leo to get ice packs. "Come here," he said to Julian. "Let me put some ice on that to stop any more bleeding." "Thank you, uncle," Julian said, bowing slightly. Tom gently applied the ice to Julian's forehead and the back of his neck, then patiently cleaned his face with a damp towel, sighing with concern. "You kids have to take care of yourselves at school. If you're not feeling well, you have to tell a teacher or your parents. Don't just try to bear it on your own." That one sentence broke Julian's defenses. He had been dealt this terrible blow, and it felt like he had to bear it all alone. At his own home, facing his indifferent father, he had managed to hold it together. But here, in the presence of Leo's kind parents, he couldn't hold back any longer. Tears streamed down his face, and his body shook with sobs. Tom pulled him into a hug. "It's okay, good kid. Don't cry." Huddled in the man's warm embrace, Julian tried to regain control, repeating to himself over and over, "A man doesn't cry easily. I can't cry, I can't cry." "Julian, come eat your noodles," Linda said softly. A steaming bowl of noodles with 2 poached eggs on top was waiting for him. Leo's family knew about Julian's complicated family situation. To avoid upsetting him, they tactfully steered the conversation away from his home life, chatting about trivial things at school. They showered him with praise, telling him how lucky Leo was to be his friend, asking how he always managed to get first place, and saying how overjoyed they would be to have a son like him. Julian looked up. "Auntie, do you really mean that? You want a son like me?" "Of course," Linda replied instantly. "A son like you is a parent's pride." Tom cleared his throat and shot his wife a look. Linda realized her slip of the tongue had touched a sore spot. Such an outstanding boy, yet tossed back and forth by his own parents like a ball. After eating, Leo took Julian to his room. He had already spotted the strawberry cake. "Son, you shouldn't have, but since you brought it, I won't be polite." Leo eagerly cut the cake in half and gave a piece to Julian. Julian felt a pang of guilt, wanting to explain that the cake wasn't originally for him, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. Suddenly, he felt a cold smear on his cheek. Leo had dabbed a bit of frosting on his face and was laughing. "What are you daydreaming about? You dare ambush me," Julian retorted, grabbing his piece of cake and lunging at Leo. Leo dodged, laughing heartily. They chased each other around the room like 2 mischievous elementary schoolers. The pressure in Julian's heart was released in that moment. Only with Leo did he feel free from the constant reminders to grow up and be sensible. Exhausted from their play, they flopped onto the bed. "Son, where did you go this afternoon?" Leo asked, catching his breath. "I didn't want to go to class, so I went fishing by the river," Julian answered truthfully. "What? You, the great Julian Zhuang, didn't want to go to class?" Leo was incredulous. "Yeah, I'm tired of being a good student for over a decade," Julian said meaningfully. He then added, "I met a girl under the ginkgo trees at the field. She's even prettier than Mia. We hung out all day." "You're dreaming. There's no girl at our school prettier than Mia," Leo said, completely unconvinced. His friend's skepticism made Julian pause. It was like a wake-up call. Mia was considered the school's top beauty. If there really was a girl named Lily who was even prettier, he surely would have heard her name before. Was her name also fake? Or was she not even a student at their school? Seeing Julian fall silent, Leo asked, "What class is she in?" Julian stammered. "She said she's in class 23. "You're talking nonsense," Leo said, shaking his head, convinced Julian was losing his mind. He pulled out his phone. "It's still early. Want to play around?" Julian frowned. "Aren't you afraid I'll drag you down? Just play support. Watch me carry," Leo said confidently. "The only support I can play is the fish." As a model student, Julian rarely played video games and was terrible at them. But if he dared to skip class, playing a game was no big deal. The two launched a popular MOBA game. Leo was Diamond 3 and Julian was Platinum 4, so they could just barely queue together. The Fish was a nickname for a support hero known for being easy to play, perfect for beginners. The happy gaming session began. It did not go well. From losing narrowly, to being soundly beaten, to getting completely steamrolled, they lost game after game. Eventually, Leo was demoted to Diamond 4 and Julian to Gold Eye, and they could no longer play together. "You play that fish hero very well," Leo said, tossing his phone aside. "Don't play him again." Julian, thinking it was a compliment, just said, "Okay." It was getting late. Time for bed. The real world was too bitter. It was better to dream. In dreams, you could have anything. The next morning during reading period, while Leo was loudly reciting a classical text about a mythical giant fish, Julian was quietly writing. He was writing a self-criticism essay. He had enjoyed his day of freedom, but he had broken the rules, and he would accept the consequences. Sure enough, before the period was over, his homeroom teacher, Mr. Zhang, appeared at the door. "Julian, come with me to my office." The teacher's office was quiet, with only a few teachers preparing for their classes. "Mr. Zhang unscrewed the lid of his thermos and took a sip of goji berry tea. Before he could even speak, Julian handed him the essay. It was 1,000 words long, the ink still fresh, filled with classical allusions and elegant prose. Mr. Zhang slammed his hand on the desk. Julian, do you have any idea what you're doing? Where did you go yesterday afternoon? He demanded. I'm sorry, Mr. Zhang. I know I was wrong, Julian said with sincere remorse. You are the top student in the entire grade, and now you're pulling stunts like this. As your teacher, I am deeply disappointed. You're not just being irresponsible to yourself, but to your parents and your teachers. You're setting a terrible example. Mr. Zhang lectured him at length, his passion fueled by concern. The deeper the love, the harsher the criticism. He didn't want his best student to go astray. Julian stood there taking the scolding, but he felt a sense of relief. He could feel his teacher's genuine care for him, a kindness he might never be able to repay. When Mr. Zhang finally paused to drink more tea, Julian saw his opening. If he couldn't tell his parents yet, his homeroom teacher was the next best person. The other teachers had left, and they were alone in the office. Mr. Zhang, Julian began, his eyes turning red. I took a sick day the other day. You were the one who approved my leave slip. Mr. Zhang's brows furrowed. Is everything okay with your health? Mr. Zhang, you're the teacher I respect most. I don't want to hide this from you. I'm very sick. Julian's lower lip trembled violently. What? What do you mean? Mr. Zhang sensed something was terribly wrong. Julian steeled himself, then pulled the folded diagnosis from his pocket, smoothed it out, and placed it on the desk. Mr. Zhang's eyes scanned the paper, and his expression changed dramatically. It was as if a bolt of lightning had struck him. Impossible. This has to be a misdiagnosis. Julian, don't worry. I'll take you for another checkup. They must have made a mistake. Julian shook his head. It's not a misdiagnosis, sir. I've been getting nosebleeds for 6 months now. How can this be? You're only 18. Mr. Zhang couldn't accept it. Everyone faces death, but for a vibrant young man like Julian, it should have been a distant prospect. He had a whole brilliant life ahead of him. Mr. Zhang, I don't want to be pitted, Julian pleaded. I just want to live out my final days as I please. What do your parents say? Are they still letting you come to school? Mr. Zhang asked, his voice filled with sorrow. I want to be with my teachers and classmates, Julian replied. He felt closer to them than to his own parents. He didn't say he only had 3 months left, and he didn't dare admit that he was hiding this from his family. Mr. Zhang knew Julian's family situation was complex. He had often wondered how such a dysfunctional family could produce such an exceptional child, a child who could face death with such composure. Julian bowed deeply. Mr. Zhang, I know I was wrong about yesterday. It won't happen again. Mr. Zhang's eyes stung. It's okay. I'm not angry anymore. If you don't feel like coming to class, you can just ask me for leave. He understood. Growing up in that environment, Julian must have suppressed so much. To want some release when facing death was only human. He felt he hadn't been attentive enough as a teacher. If only he had noticed the signs earlier, maybe there would have been a chance. Mr. Zhang, I don't want to be the class president anymore. Please choose someone else. All right. You need to relax. Don't feel any pressure. Cooperate with the doctors. Don't give up until the very last moment, Mr. Zhang said, though even he didn't believe his own words of comfort. Julian slowly picked up the diagnosis from the desk, folded it carefully, and put it back in his pocket, as if performing a solemn ritual. Julian, for now, just attend classes as normal. If you feel unwell at any point, you must tell me immediately, Mr. Zhang said, his heart heavy. He understood Julian's desire to finish his studies, to leave no regrets. But his duty as a teacher filled him with guilt and worry. Thank you, Mr. Zhang. I'm afraid I'm going to let you down, Julian said, his eyes wet with tears, bowing once more. You won't. You have always been the student I am most proud of, Mr. Zhang choked out. A student like Julian was a credit to the class, to the school. He would have gone on to do great things. What a tragedy. Heaven is jealous of talent. Pushing aside his grief, Julian remembered something. Mr. Zhang, just to confirm, there are only 22 classes in our grade, right? The teacher was confused. Of course. Why do you ask? I met a girl yesterday who said she was from class 23. Don't overthink things. Go back to class. Mr. Zhang assumed the question was a result of the shock and tried to keep the atmosphere calm. He would treat Julian normally, without pity, as the boy had asked. That was the greatest respect he could offer. Julian gave his teacher one last, deep bow and walked out of the office with heavy steps. As he watched him go, the emotions Mr. Zhang had been suppressing finally erupted. He slammed his fist on the desk. The man in his 40s sat there, his eyes red, crying. To see any 18-year-old boy treated so unfairly by fate would be enough to make anyone weep, let alone the best student in his class. After leaving the office, Julian didn't go back to his classroom. He walked up the stairs, all the way to the 5th floor, and saw for himself that the hallway ended with class 22. Beyond it, there were only empty classrooms. Little butterfly, he thought, who are you? And where did you come from? The 20-minute break after the second period which was once for morning exercises, was now free time for students to relax. Mia, sitting in front of Julian, turned around. Julian, why were you crying in math class yesterday? And why did you skip the afternoon classes? She asked, her voice full of concern. Julian gave a vague answer. I was in a bad mood, so I just did something to cheer myself up. Mia pouted. You're the class president and the top student in the grade. You should be setting a good example. What you did was way out of line. She couldn't understand what had happened. One sick day, and he seemed like a different person. The old Julian would never have done that. If he was in a bad mood, he would have buried himself in a practice exam, not skipped class. As his friend, she was worried he was going down the wrong path. Leo, guessing that Julian's family was the source of his sadness, jumped in to defend him. Mia, don't worry about it. My son had a great time skipping class yesterday. He did something I've always wanted to do, but never dared. Mia shot Leo a glare. He was led astray by you. What does it have to do with me? Leo retorted. He told me himself he met a girl yesterday who's even prettier than you, and they hung out all day. Julian scrambled to cover Leo's mouth, but it was too late. That big mouth of his just had to spill the beans. Julian, you're not learning good things, are you? Getting into relationships? Mia demanded, her almond-shaped eyes wide. No, I just met her yesterday, Julian quickly denied. Most students at their school were good kids. While they dreamed of romance, few dared to act on it. Mia, as the school beauty, was used to being praised. Hearing that there might be a girl prettier than her left a sour taste in her mouth. Leo, being a typical straightforward guy, was often annoyed by Mia's princess-like attitude and enjoyed riling her up. The two started bickering right in front of Julian. Mia called him a chauvinist who would be single forever. Leo shot back that even if he were single forever, he wouldn't choose her. It ended with Mia yelling at him to go die and him retorting that he was too tough to die. Finally, she reached out and pinched his arm hard, making him yelp. Girls, they always resort to violence when they can't win an argument. Watching their playful spat, a wave of endless sorrow washed over Julian. Such lovely classmates. In 3 months, he would never see them again. The most precious friendships, frozen forever at the age of 18. When they finally quieted down, Julian spoke. Son, you're the guy, be more generous. Go easy on Mia in the future. Leo touched his forehead. Are you sick? I argue with her every day, and you've never said anything. Mia, I apologize on his behalf. You know he has no filter, Julian said, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Julian, you're being weird too. Why are you suddenly so polite? Mia said, still suspicious. Then, still hung up on the earlier comment, she asked again. Did you really meet a girl who's prettier than me? Well, whether a girl is pretty or not is subjective. I can't really say, Julian equivocated. My son is handsome and smart. Of course his girlfriend would be the prettiest. Looks like you don't have a chance, Leo added, deliberately trying to provoke Mia. Since Julian and Mia were close, rumors about them dating were common in their class. In reality, their relationship was purely platonic. But with Leo stirring the pot, Mia felt a strange pang, almost like she'd just been dumped. To save face, she scoffed. I don't believe you. You two are just trying to get my attention, playing hard to get. She was confident in her looks. There was no way there was a prettier girl on campus. It was just a childish trick to provoke her competitive spirit. Mia, I'd advise you to be a bit more humble. There's always someone better out there, Julian said, his confidence in Lily's looks unwavering. Julian, are you secretly in love with me? Are you using this to get a reaction? You two are putting on a show, aren't you? Mia stared at them, a look of someone who had figured it all out. Aren't you a bit full of yourself? With my looks, plenty of girls at school have a crush on me too, Julian joked along. Just then, a mocking voice cut in from the side. Julian, you're not afraid of spraining your tongue? Julian looked up. The speaker was Victor Xie, the vice president of their class. He had always been resentful of Julian, who outshone him as president. He also had a crush on Mia, who always seemed to favor Julian. So, Victor rarely missed a chance to take a jab at him. In the past, Julian would have let it slide for the sake of class unity. But now, he wasn't going to hold back. When we elected the class president, wasn't everyone voting based on looks? That's why I'm president and you're vice president. Mia and Leo burst out laughing. It was true that Julian was much better looking than Victor, but to hear him say it himself was quite something. Victor was indignant. You only got to be president because of your grades. You're just a bookworm. When it comes to all-around ability, are you better than me? So you want to be president? Julian asked, looking him straight in the eye. If you weren't so good at sucking up to the teachers, I would have been president long ago, Victor said angrily. If you want to be president, go ask Mr. Zhuang. I'm quitting, Julian said calmly. Yeah, right. As if you'd give it up, Victor scoffed, thinking Julian was just messing with him. Julian's tone was full of meaning. Ever heard the story of the phoenix and the owl? The owl clutched a dead mouse, terrified the phoenix would take it. But the phoenix wouldn't even look at it. The class presidency that Victor coveted so much was nothing more than a dead mouse in Julian's eyes. You're so full of yourself, Victor sneered. Victor, we're talking to Julian. What's it to you? Mia said, annoyed. Mia, you're so nice to Julian. Are you afraid he'll be snatched away by that prettier girl? Leo teased again. Are you crazy? Mia is the school beauty. How could there be a prettier girl? Victor laughed even more loudly. Just then, a classmate returning from the restroom called out to Julian. There's a girl outside looking for you. Julian heard him and glanced out the window. His breath caught in his throat. The girl outside was wearing a pure white blouse, a royal blue pleated skirt, and spotless canvas shoes. Most strikingly, there was a fresh peach blossom tucked behind her ear. She turned her head and smiled, a smile that outshone the flower. Julian shot up from his seat and pushed through the crowd, rushing out of the classroom. The room immediately exploded into chaos. Who is that girl? She's gorgeous. There really is a girl in our school prettier than Mia. Victor just got his face slapped so hard. Mia stared at Julian's retreating back, her expression a mix of hurt and disbelief. Men, they're all the same. Julian rushed into the hallway. What are you doing here? He asked, breathless. Lily produced a small tube of ointment from behind her back. This is for you. The doctor said it can help with nosebleeds. Julian took it. It was just a standard hemostatic ointment. He knew it wouldn't cure his illness, but he still managed a faint smile. Thank you. There's still time before class. Want to go sit over there with me? Lily asked, pointing to a nearby flower bed. Of course, Julian nodded eagerly. The flower bed was a riot of color, with calla lilies, hyacinths, and wisteria all competing for attention. A few butterflies flitted among the blossoms. Lily smoothed her skirt and sat down on the edge of the planter. Did your parents like the strawberry cake yesterday? She asked. At her words, Julian's heart tightened. He couldn't bring himself to tell her that his small, thoughtful cake had been utterly overshadowed by Aaron's enormous birthday cake, or that his trip home had been anything but pleasant. This girl was so pure and innocent. She must believe that the world was a beautiful place. So he decided to lie. Your idea was great, thank you. My little brother loved the cake. He got frosting all over his face. He continued, weaving a story. My dad was really happy too. He asked about my studies, and when he heard I got first place again, he gave me a big hug. My stepmom made a huge dinner and kept putting food on my plate, telling me how smart and sensible I was. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of flowers. Lily sat with her knees hugged to her chest, her head tilted up slightly, her bright eyes fixed on him as she listened quietly. The sounds of the sports field, the chatter from the school building, the chirping of birds in the trees, all seemed to fade away. The world shrank to just the two of them, and the vibrant flowers behind them. Julian had rehearsed this scene in his dreams countless times. He thought he could deliver the lines flawlessly, but his heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. The smile he forced onto his lips was stiff and unnatural. He had been a good kid his whole life. He wasn't a good liar. Julian, you're a terrible liar, Lily said suddenly. Why are you calling me that? He asked, taken aback. You're lying to me, she said, gently biting her lower lip. Friends should be honest with each other. I'm sorry, Julian apologized, his voice hoarse. The truth was often cruel. He didn't want his sadness to infect his friend. Julian, are you still very sad? Lily asked softly. Julian nodded, then shook his head. Then after school, let's out for lunch. I'll take you to eat something good again. Wait for me here. Huh? Okay. The bell was about to ring. Lily stood up, waved at Julian, and then bounced away, the peach blossom in her hair bobbing with each step. In a moment, she had disappeared into the crowd. Julian stood there, clutching the warm tube of ointment in his hand. Back in the classroom, Leo immediately sidled up to him. Son, who was that girl? I told you last night, Julian replied. She's the girl I met under the ginkgo trees. You didn't believe me then. I believe you now. No wonder you skipped class for her. Leo raised his voice intentionally. Compared to her, Mia is just average. Mia, who had been eavesdropping, turned around and gave Leo a death glare. Then she looked deeply at Julian, her feelings a complicated mess. It seemed she really was a little bit jealous. Julian was handsome, smart, and had a gentle personality. A boy like that was a rare find. The bell rang for class. It was Mr. Zhang's literature period. After the students had greeted him, he gestured for them to sit. Before we begin, I have an announcement. This morning, Julian Zhuang resigned from his position as class president, and I have approved his request. Whispers immediately broke out among the students. They couldn't believe it. No one was more suited for the job. He had done so much for the class over the past 2 years. He had always been their pride. Victor Xie was particularly shocked. He thought Julian had just been joking earlier. Was the position he coveted so much really nothing more than a dead mouse to Julian? Mr. Zhang's voice was emotional. Class, let's give a round of applause to thank Julian for his contributions. He led the class in a thunderous applause. Julian looked around at all the familiar faces, a wave of reluctance washing over him. In 3 months, he would never see them again. His classmates were all so wonderful. He was grateful they had been part of his youth. With the president's resignation, it was only natural for the vice president to take over. Victor Xie got his wish and became the new class president, but he felt no joy. He was only getting something Julian had thrown away. Jealousy twisted his features. Julian paid him no mind. He was already focused on a much more important question: what to eat for lunch. School let out at noon and resumed at 2:30. During the break, students were free to come and go. When the bell finally rang, Leo slapped Julian on the shoulder. Son, cafeteria today? I have something to do. Find someone else, Julian said, his eyes already scanning the flower bed outside. What could you possibly have to do? We always eat lunch together, Leo wondered aloud. I'll explain later. I gotta go, Julian said, quickly packing his bag and rushing out. Leo stared after him, feeling abandoned. When he saw Julian waiting by the flower bed for the girl with the peach blossom in her hair, he felt like his lungs would explode. Seriously? Ditching your bro for a girl? What a beast. When Julian saw Lily, a wide smile spread across his face. He asked her tentatively, what floor is your class on? You got down here pretty fast. 5th floor, she said, catching her breath. I ran because I wanted to see you. A light sparked in Julian's eyes. Was he really someone worth running for? What do you want to eat? My treat, Julian said. Let's get mini hot pot. They have lots of options. At the mention of food, Lily looked like she was about to drool. Aren't you afraid of smelling like hot pot all afternoon? You should eat what you want to eat. Why worry so much? This girl was so carefree. Being with her made him feel lighter. She was so beautiful, yet she refused to be a quiet, pretty girl. She bounced when she walked and chattered when she talked. A happy little butterfly. The mini hot pot restaurant Lily chose was delicious and affordable, a popular spot among students. Each person got their own small pot, about 8 inches in diameter, bubbling away on an induction cooktop. The vibrant red broth simmered and rolled, looking incredibly appetizing. Lily ticked off item after item on the menu, muttering to herself, beef, tripe, potatoes, mushrooms, duck blood, shrimp dumplings, spam, sweet rice cakes, pineapple tarts. Are you sure you can eat all that? Julian reminded her. I have a big appetite, she said without looking up. Besides, you're here, aren't you? Julian quietly sipped his lemon tea, not daring to say another word. It would be embarrassing for a guy to have a smaller appetite than a girl. Soon, the waiter brought their orders. Lily neatly divided each dish between their 2 pots. Then she asked, Coke or Pepsi? Coke, Julian replied. Lily waved over the waiter and ordered 2 ice-cold Cokes. The dark soda fizzed as it was poured into glasses. She raised her glass to his. To forgetting all your worries and being happy every day, Julian. He was touched. Thank you, Lily. The carbonated drink stung his throat slightly. She placed the first cooked slice of beef into Julian's bowl before starting to eat herself, offering a running commentary like a food critic. The duck intestines are a bit overcooked. The seaweed is too salty. The beef balls aren't bouncy enough. Her mouth never seemed to stop. Julian handed her a napkin. You've got some oil on your mouth. She took it and wiped her mouth messily. Thanks. Usually, pretty girls were very conscious of their image. But Lily, with her fairy-like face, seemed to relish every messy, earthly pleasure. It made her incredibly approachable and likable. Lily, why are you always so happy? Julian asked. A day is a day, whether you're happy or not. So why not be happy every day? She countered with a smile. Julian nodded silently. He couldn't argue with that. If he kept dwelling on yesterday's sadness, he would be the lesser for it. By the way, do you have a nickname? She asked curiously. Julian shook his head, looking blank. His classmates either called him by his title, class president, or by his full name. Only Leo called him son, which didn't really count. Then I'll call you Big Dummy, Lily said, dipping a piece of tripe into her pot. Why? That sounds awful, he protested. Because you lied to me this morning, and you were terrible at it, she said, still holding a grudge. Julian thought to himself. He had been first in his grade for 2 years straight. If he was a dummy, what did that make everyone else? They finished their hot pot in about 40 minutes. After fishing out the last piece of potato, Lily popped it in her mouth with a look of pure satisfaction. Julian motioned for the bill. Lily quickly interjected. I was the one who wanted hot pot. Let me pay. Julian smiled. I'll get this one. You can get the next. All right then, she agreed. Just like that, they had already planned their next outing. They left the restaurant around 1 in the afternoon. Julian planned to go to his mother's apartment to clean it up, since he would be living there for the foreseeable future. When Lily heard, she insisted on coming along to help. As they were opening the door, the neighbor from next door, a young woman Julian had seen a few times, came out. He greeted her politely. Oh, got a girlfriend? She asked, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the beautiful Lily. No, we're just friends, Julian explained, embarrassed. It's okay, you don't have to hide it from me. It's normal for young people to date, she said knowingly. Lily's face turned red. For all her usual chattiness, she was silent now, not knowing how to respond. The apartment was a bit old, but had good lighting. Helen rarely stayed there, sometimes just crashing at a hotel near the train station when she was busy. The place was sparsely furnished and felt empty, lacking any plants or signs of life. Lily, Julian said, for the next 3 months, if you want to hang out, you can come here. Lily blinked her large, watery eyes. And after 3 months? We'll see. Julian evaded, his eyes dimming. By then, he'd probably be in a hospital. Few people in this world would be sad about his departure. A smile touched Lily's lips. If you make me mad, I won't come find you. I won't, Julian blurted out. The next 3 months would surely be filled with loneliness and pain. He didn't want to lose this precious splash of color in his fading life. Lily, despite her delicate appearance, was a surprisingly good worker, clearly used to doing chores at home. Together, they quickly made the small apartment feel clean and cozy. When they went out to take out the trash, they stopped by a nearby supermarket to buy some necessities. Julian specifically bought a tear-off daily calendar. He weighed the stack of 90 pages in his hand. This thin stack of paper was the countdown to the end of his life. At the checkout, Lily, not wanting to wait in line, went outside. When Julian came out, he found her holding a round glass fishbowl with 2 red goldfish swimming happily among some pebbles and water plants. Julian, this is a gift for you. A housewarming present. Why 2 fish? I can barely take care of myself, he muttered. I owed you for making you miss catching a fish yesterday, she said seriously. This will bring some life to your new home. Promise me you won't let them die. Let them die? Julian was taken aback. The fish. If you let them die, I'll never forgive you, she said, shaking a small fist. Julian gazed into her eyes, as if trying to see into her soul. It was such a joy to be friends with a girl like her. But why did he have to meet her now, when his life was about to end? Little butterfly, if only I had met you sooner. On the way back to school, Lily hummed a cheerful tune, a song older than she was. Infected by her optimism, Julian seemed to forget his troubles. A faint scent of peach blossoms drifted through the tree-lined path on campus. Lily, give me your phone number. That way you can call me next time you want to find me. It took Julian a while to work up the courage to ask. Lily seemed to have been waiting for this, immediately pulling out her phone. It was small and delicate, with a faint blue sheen in the sunlight. They happily exchanged numbers, the 2 days of bonding making the moment feel completely natural. Text me during the day, she instructed. I don't use my phone at night. All you do is look at silly jokes. Why not at night? Julian laughed. How dare you make fun of me? At least I'm not like you guys, playing video games all the time. She feigned anger and playfully tugged at his shirt. They chased each other down the path, their laughter echoing across the green grass. They parted ways at the stairwell, as Julian's classroom was on the 2nd floor. Goodbye, Lily. I'll text you. Okay. I might not see it if I'm busy, but I'll reply as soon as I do. After watching her go upstairs, Julian started towards his classroom. Halfway there, he suddenly turned and bounded up the stairs, wanting to see which class she was in. He checked the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors, but she was nowhere to be found. How did she move so fast? He slumped against the railing, walking back down in frustration. They were friends now, yet she still wouldn't tell him her real class. Did she still not trust him? The afternoon classes dragged on. Most students were drowsy and listless. Julian remembered how quickly time had flown the previous afternoon while fishing with Lily by the river. Was this the theory of relativity in action? The last class ended at 6 o'clock sharp. Mr. Zhuang appeared at the classroom door and gestured for Julian to follow him. Julian quickly packed his bag and went out. Once they were far from the classroom, he asked cautiously, Mr. Zhuang, where are we going? To the hospital, the teacher said grimly. I need to speak with your doctor myself. Is that really necessary? Dr. Chun is very busy, Julian protested instinctively. He hated the antiseptic smell of hospitals, the sight of white coats. The walls of a hospital have heard more sincere prayers than any temple. It was a place of too many partings, too many goodbyes. But Mr. Zhuang was determined. He wouldn't give up any chance to save Julian. Even if it was hopeless, he needed to hear it from the doctor himself. In the parking lot, he started his old Buick and told Julian to get in. As they passed the school bus stop, Julian saw the number 19 bus pulling up. He craned his neck, searching the crowd for a flash of a peach blossom, but he was disappointed. Maybe there were too many people, or maybe Mr. Zhuang was driving too fast. He didn't see his little butterfly. At the hospital, Julian led his teacher to Dr. Chen's office. The doctor adjusted his glasses and shook Mr. Zhang's hand, his expression grave. Mr. Zhuang introduced himself as Julian's homeroom teacher, there to learn about his condition. Dr. Chen expressed his admiration for such a dedicated teacher. Mr. Zhuang pleaded, asking if there was truly no hope. The two men then discussed Julian's case. Dr. Chen, a meticulous and knowledgeable physician, used a great deal of professional terminology to convey a simple, brutal message. The illness was in its final stages. There was nothing more to be done. The last glimmer of hope in Mr. Zhang's eyes faded. A tide of grief washed over him. He's only 18. What? I had another patient with the same illness, Dr. Chen sighed. A girl. She was even younger than him. Julian sat quietly through their conversation, as if the topic had nothing to do with him. It had been 2 days. He was slowly moving past the initial shock and sadness, coming to terms with his reality. He thought about his classmates. What would they look like when they were old? White hair, no teeth, age spots, shuffling along. He wouldn't have those problems. Julian Zhuang would be 18 forever. Leaving the hospital, Mr. Zhang was silent, his mood heavy. Mr. Zhang, don't look so grim. Cheer up, Julian said lightly, mimicking Lily's cheerful tone. Since nothing could be changed, might as well live each day happily. Julian, is there anything you want to eat or drink? Mr. Zhang asked, his voice thick with sorrow. I don't want to be pitted, Julian said. No, that's not what I meant, the teacher quickly clarified. Just drop me off at the school gate and go home to your wife and kids, Julian said breezily. As much as he wanted to take advantage of the offer, he was still full from the hot pot at lunch. He'd have something simple for dinner. At the school gate, Julian said goodbye to Mr. Zhang and walked home alone. He bought a hot dog and fried rice from a street vendor. When he got home, he saw the vendor had written dog rice on the container to distinguish it. His appetite vanished. He took a handful of colorful pills as prescribed, wondering if they did any good at all. Would they really give him 3 months instead of 90 days? He fed the goldfish. He remembered a myth that fish only have 7-second memories. If only he were a fish, he could forget all his sorrows. Next to the fishbowl was the bamboo flute, its red tassel bright. It was the only thing he had brought from his father's house. He had learned to play as a child, but had long since stopped. Now, when he tried to play a simple tune, it sounded awful. Suddenly, a strange, beautiful melody came to mind. The music he had heard when he first met Lily. He tried to play it, but it came out all wrong. He gave up. It was getting dark. If he kept playing, the neighbors might start knocking. Julian stared at his phone, at the contact saved as Little Butterfly. He typed a message, deleted it, and typed it again. Finally, he settled on. What do you want for breakfast tomorrow? I'll bring it for you. He mulled it over, making sure it didn't sound too forward, then mustered the courage to hit send. He waited and waited, but there was no reply. He got a bucket of water and started scrubbing the floor. The apartment was already spotless from their cleaning session that afternoon, but the waiting was excruciating. If he didn't find something to do, he felt like he would explode. 10 minutes later, he eagerly checked his phone again. Still nothing. What could she be so busy with at this hour? He stared at the screen for a few more seconds before steeling himself and making a call. Sorry, the subscriber you have dialed is not in service. Please redial later. He listened to the entire message, even the English part. In this day and age, how could there be a place with no signal? Was she a caveman living on a mountain? Julian opened the window, a cool night breeze washing over him. A crescent moon hung high in the sky. He had finally done what he'd wanted to do for a decade, run away from home. No more walking on eggshells, no more tiptoeing around. He could do what he wanted, see who he wanted. He was dying, yet he felt like he had just started to live. Even if it was only for 3 months, he could still live a brilliant life. Gazing at the moon, he felt a sudden urge for a drink. He poured himself a glass of Coke. His reflection in the window was a handsome, spirited young man. Congratulations, Julian. Cheers. He clinked his glass against his reflection and drank it down. That night, in this simple little home, he slept more soundly than he had in a long time. He dreamed he was a butterfly, joyfully flapping his wings, flying over famous mountains and rivers, seeing all the beauty the world had to offer. The next morning, the first ray of sunlight slanted through the window. A notification sound woke Julian from his dream. He fumbled for his phone under his pillow and saw a reply from Lily. All sleepiness vanished. I made some sweet green rice balls. Do you want some? Julian immediately typed back. Yes. I'll buy drinks. Milk or soy milk? Soy milk. Meet me at the bus stop, she replied instantly. Julian sprang out of bed and took a hot shower. He had a habit of showering in the morning. It was more efficient. He hadn't worn the gaudy floral shirt again. He had bought a few discounted spring clothes with Lily yesterday and chose a light blue thin jacket and black casual pants, a look more in line with his usual good student image. As he left, he tore a page from his daily calendar. It felt as if his life had become tangible. Each day a single sheet of paper he was personally tearing away. Downstairs, he saw his neighbor doing her morning exercises. Morning, miss, he greeted. She smiled back. Going to school, Julian? That girl from yesterday didn't stay over. Don't joke, miss. She's just a friend. All right, it's good for young people to have friends. Bring her around more often. Lily was pretty, cheerful, and optimistic. The neighbor had taken a liking to her after just one meeting. Seeing them together reminded her of her own school days. She had no idea that this vibrant young man was already facing the end of his life. At the breakfast shop, Julian bought 2 cups of soy milk, one with red dates and one with black sesame. He didn't know which flavor Lily preferred, so he'd let her choose. He waited at the bus stop for nearly 10 minutes before the number 19 bus arrived. The doors opened, and a stream of smiling students poured out. The last one off the bus was a girl so beautiful she seemed unreal. She wore the same outfit as before, white shirt, blue skirt, white canvas shoes, and a peach blossom behind her ear. Julian found it strange that she'd worn the same clothes for 3 days. White clothes get dirty so easily, yet hers were always spotless. Little butterfly, Julian called out. Julian, sorry, have you been waiting long? Lily asked, her large eyes blinking. No, I just got here. See, the soy milk is still warm, he smiled. In fact, it had been scalding hot when he left the shop. After 10 minutes of holding it, It was now the perfect temperature. They walked to the same flower bed as yesterday. The hyacinths and wisteria were still dotted with morning dew, sparkling in the sun. Lily was carrying a black shoulder bag today. She pulled out a paper-wrapped package, a fragrant aroma wafting from it. Inside were green rice balls, a traditional snack made from glutinous rice flour mixed with mugwort juice, filled with sweet bean paste. One bite, and it felt like you were eating spring itself. Julian took one. It was filled with red bean paste, sweet but not cloying. Wow, they're beautiful and delicious. Did you really make these yourself? Lily nodded. Of course. My grandma taught me. You're so skilled. These are beautiful. Julian praised sincerely. Mugwort is good for you. Eat more, and your nosebleeds will definitely stop, she said, sipping her red date soy milk. What? You made these specifically for me? Julian was surprised. Of course. It's a lot of trouble. You have to pick fresh mugwort, mash it, mix it with the flour, steam it, then fill it. I got up so early today, she said, covering a yawn. Julian's heart warmed. He never thought someone would put so much effort into something for him. It was a shame these rice balls couldn't cure his nosebleeds. Lily, I'm fine. You don't have to do so much for me in the future. Lily shook her head stubbornly. No way. We're friends. Friends should care for each other. Julian silently ate the rice balls, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. Fate, are you playing with me? Why would you send someone like this to me when I'm about to die? Oh, Julian. Sorry. Lily suddenly remembered. I can't use my phone at night, so I only saw your message this morning. It's okay, he said softly. I knew you'd reply when you saw it. Class is starting. Thanks for the soy milk. But, she waved the cup at him and lightly skipped up the stairs, disappearing around the corner. Julian stood by the flower bed, watching the spot where she had vanished. He had been standing in the shadow of the building, but as the sun rose, the shadow retreated. Warm sunlight bathed him, making him glow. When Julian walked into the classroom, he saw Mia eating pan-fried buns. The newly appointed class president, Victor, was fawning over her, fussing and asking if she was warm enough. The school beauty never lacked for admirers. But all of Victor's efforts earned him nothing but a cold shoulder from Mia. When she saw Julian, Mia looked a bit awkward and explained, Julian, I told him I didn't want them, but Victor insisted on buying them for me. Julian just smiled faintly. Why are you telling me? Mia was taken aback. The moment she saw him, she had felt the need to distance herself from Victor. In the past, she would sometimes text Julian and ask him to bring her breakfast. Psychologically, the food Julian bought always seemed more delicious than Victor's. Mia had a private driver who took her to and from school. Earlier, she had seen Julian from her car window at the bus stop, holding 2 cups of soy milk. She had foolishly assumed one was for her. But now, he was holding only 1 cup, and he was drinking it himself. Was the other one for the girl with the peach blossom? A pang of jealousy rose from the bottom of her heart. Their relationship had been just platonic friendship. But now, with a rival in the picture threatening her status as the school beauty, she couldn't help but feel a little tense. Julian was oblivious to the drama unfolding in Mia's mind. He plopped down in his seat and pulled a magazine out of Leo's desk. Leo was often late for morning reading and was frequently punished by being made to stand outside the classroom. Mia, have some milk? It's still warm. Victor continued his diligent efforts. Victor, don't buy me breakfast anymore. I'm afraid Julian will get the wrong idea, Mia said with a frown. Victor's world came crashing down. In Mia's heart, Julian had always been the most outstanding boy in the class. Victor was just a clown, not even worthy of carrying Julian's shoes. Seeing Lily yesterday had especially ignited Mia's competitive spirit. She didn't know what love was, but seeing Julian with another girl made her feel uneasy. The thought made her cheeks flush. During class, Julian returned to his model student persona. Ms. Wu, the math teacher, even came over to check on him, remembering how upset he had been at the board the other day. Thank you, Miss Wu. I'm fine now, Julian said, touched. Mr. Zhuang had already spoken to her, explaining that Julian had just been emotional due to some personal issues. At lunchtime, Julian went to the cafeteria with Leo. He had debated texting Lily to eat together, but they had just seen each other that morning, and he didn't want to seem too clingy. The cafeteria was noisy and chaotic. Julian and Leo found a corner table near the vending machines. Son, you seem a bit distracted, Leo said, chewing on a large piece of braised pork. No, I'm not. I'm eating very seriously. Julian was eating, but his eyes were constantly scanning the crowd, as if looking for someone. He was holding his chopsticks upside down without even noticing. Boys know boys. Leo didn't need to guess what was on Julian's mind. He asked secretively, tell me again, how did you and that girl meet? Julian recounted the story, from their first encounter under the ginkgo tree to fishing by the river and seeing her off on the bus. You said you shared a milkshake? Leo's eyes widened. Yeah, she insisted. It would have been rude to refuse, Julian said, a smile playing on his lips. That's an indirect kiss. You know, kissing can get you pregnant, right? Leo exclaimed. Are you kidding me? Do you think I'm 3 years old? Julian retorted, snatching a piece of braised pork from Leo's plate. Leo, who had never been in a relationship, shamelessly pestered Julian to describe what it was like to share a drink with a girl. Was it sweet? Was it smooth? Did his heart race? Julian ignored him and focused on his food. Suddenly, a pair of pristine white canvas shoes entered his line of sight, attached to two slender, perfectly drawn calves. "Excuse me, may I sit here?" a voice like a songbird asked. Julian looked up and met Lily's eyes. Leo quickly said, "Please sit." Lily set down her tray, smoothed her skirt, and sat down next to Julian. A faint, sweet scent filled the air. "Hi, I'm Lily Sue, Julian's friend." She introduced herself to Leo. "Hi, I'm Leo Lee, Julian's dad." "No, his good friend," Leo stammered. He had never spoken to a girl this beautiful before. Julian silently cursed him for being so useless in front of a pretty girl. "My treat for drinks. What do you guys want?" Lily asked, looking at the vending machine. "Awesome. I'll have a Fanta," Leo said quickly. "I'll have a Coke," Julian said. His doctor had told him to cut back on soda, but now, all restrictions were off. He just wanted to be happy. After getting the drinks, Lily asked Leo, "Is Julian usually this boring?" Leo nodded emphatically. "He's a ruthless studying machine. He's bad at everything else, especially video games. He's so bad he made me cry." "Video games?" Lily looked puzzled. "He's terrible. He can only play one hero, the fish, and he's awful at it," Leo complained. "I'm actually really good. They call me the piranha of the canyon," Julian said, trying to save face. "You're just bragging. I think you're more like a dumb, fat fish," Lily said with a look of disdain. "Little butterfly, I'll show you how good I am next time." Julian's bragging spiraled out of control. Little butterfly? Leo was stunned. They'd only known each other for a few days, and they already had pet names? "The butterfly is me, and I am the butterfly," Lily said, pointing to herself. The line sounded strangely familiar. In that moment, Leo felt completely like a third wheel. After lunch, the three of them left the cafeteria. It wasn't even 12:30. Julian planned to go back for a nap and asked Lily, "I'm going back to sleep. Wanna come?" "Huh?" Lily looked shy. Who asked so directly? Leo also looked awkward. Should he leave? Leo, completely lacking in social awareness, insisted on going with Julian for a nap. So, Lily said goodbye to them and went back to her classroom. Julian shot Leo a murderous glare. This nuisance had to go. Leo had been to Julian's rented apartment before, but it looked much cleaner and more pleasant this time. The two small goldfish swimming happily in their bowl also added a bit of life to the place. "This is nice. I'd love to move out and live on my own too." Julian rolled his eyes at him. "Isn't your family's huge two-story apartment comfortable enough?" Leo just grinned. "Forgive me for my untamed, freedom-loving soul." This guy? He didn't know how good he had it. If Julian had a family as happy as his, he would never dream of running away. They took off their shoes and lay side by side on the bed, staring at the blank white ceiling. Sleep hadn't come yet, so they started chatting. "Son, Lily is so beautiful. Are you trying to date her?" Leo asked, gossiped. "What are you talking about? I've only known her for 3 days." Julian denied immediately. "A girl like that, it's easy to fall in love at first sight." "Stop pretending," Leo mercilessly exposed him. When Julian saw Lily, his entire demeanor changed. In the language of the animal kingdom, it was a clear sign of being in heat. The casual chat suddenly took a painful turn for Julian. His voice dropped. "I won't pursue her. I'm not worthy. How could someone with only 3 months to live pursue a girl? That would just be cruel. He no longer deserved to have love." Leo was baffled by Julian's sudden gloom. He nudged him. "You're not going to go after a girl that cute? Are you sick?" Julian continued to stare at the ceiling and gave a sad smile. "Yes, I am sick." Leo didn't catch the deeper meaning and just thought he was being weird, or maybe just too shy to admit he was into the girl. After a moment of silence, Julian suddenly asked, "Son, if we couldn't see each other anymore, would you miss me?" "Miss you? My foot. I wish you'd just disappear. I'm so jealous of you. You're handsome. You're smart. You make me look like a total loser," Leo grumbled on. "I'm the one who's sick in the head for being friends with the top student in the grade. The slightest thing I do wrong at home, and my parents use you as an example to lecture me. Why are you so annoying? If you weren't in this world, I'd buy a string of firecrackers to celebrate." Julian turned slightly, and a single tear rolled silently onto his pillow. Memories flooded his mind. He and Leo had become friends on the first day of school, quickly establishing their father-son bond. Leo was carefree and simple-minded, always seeming to lack a filter, never knowing what sadness was. He truly treated Julian like his own son. He was Julian's staunchest supporter when he was class president and was always the first to volunteer for class activities. When rumors about Julian and Mia started, he enthusiastically helped to clear them up, joking that Mia actually had a crush on him. His family always included Julian in their meals, to the point that his parents joked they had 2 sons. As Leo's complaining tired him out, his eyelids grew heavy. Hearing his friend's snores, Julian turned to look at his face. Growing up in his own family environment, he was lucky to have a friend like this, so that his entire youth wasn't just a bitter memory. "Son," he thought, "promise me you won't be too sad when I'm gone. Just like you said, set off some firecrackers for me. And if you ever see the ending of Detective Conan, Burn a copy for me. I'll watch over you from the other side. His mind heavy with thoughts, Julian couldn't fall asleep. He was drifting in a half-awake state when the alarm went off. Leo, however, was sleeping like a log, drool trickling down his cheek. Julian kicked him off the bed. You got my new sheets dirty. I'll break all 3 of your legs. Leo sprang up and pounced back on the bed, and they started wrestling. You rebellious son, trying to kill your own father? The joy between boys was often that simple. On the way to school, Leo was a bundle of energy, shooting imaginary baskets and kicking pebbles. Julian pointed to a ginkgo tree. Bet you can't touch that leaf. Leo rubbed his nose confidently. What do I get if I do? You'll be the man, Julian smiled. For boys, those words were the highest praise. And for that honor, they would do anything. Leo took a running start, leaped, and plucked the large ginkgo leaf from the branch. The ginkgo tree, a species unique to their country, had witnessed hundreds of millions of years of history. Humans were but dust in comparison. In spring and summer, the leaves were green, turning a brilliant yellow in the fall, fluttering like butterflies in the wind. For Julian, the ginkgo now held another special meaning. He would never forget that first, breathtaking sight of Lily under the ginkgo tree. Am I the man or what? Leo said, proudly handing the leaf to Julian. These leaves are prettier in the fall when they turn yellow. Autumn is so far away. I might not be able to see it, Julian muttered to himself. Leo was puzzled. Julian had been acting strangely for the past couple of days. But then again, it was understandable. If he were friends with a girl that beautiful, with a potential romance blooming, he'd probably act weird too. 10 minutes into the 3rd afternoon class, Mr. Zhuang appeared at the classroom door. He apologized to the teacher and called Julian out. The class was confused. Mr. Zhuang had been summoning Julian a lot lately. Wasn't he no longer the class president? Mr. Zhuang, you keep calling me out. The other students are starting to look at me funny, Julian complained in the hallway. I can't help it. Your father is here, Mr. Zhuang said, shrugging. What's he doing here? Julian was surprised. Since he started high school here, his father, Victor, had only come once, on the very first day for registration. He had stayed for half an hour before a call from his company made him rush off. Since then, he had always had an excuse to miss parent-teacher conferences and other events. Sometimes he didn't even bother with an excuse, just saying, "You're not a child anymore. Do you still need your parents to pick you up?" Julian could only laugh bitterly. When I was a child, you never picked me up either.